Hello, my name is Simon Morton. I'm founder and managing director of Eiffel Presentations, and what we're doing is pulling together a few key people from the team just to share some war stories and experiences with different clients, fundamentally around how we've helped them develop presentations that deliver outcomes. And today I'm joined by Jack Phipps, one of our account directors. Jack, do you want to introduce yourself, share your CV?
No, thanks, Simon. Yeah, I'm one of the account directors here at Eiffel. Work closely with a number of key accounts at Eiffel, and yeah, I'm really happy to share a couple of stories on how we're supporting people at the moment.
Fantastic. Loads of stories to share, I'm sure. We'll start with one that has been a really interesting project, I think, for all of us at Eiffel, and many people have sort of been involved with it at one point or another, which is in working with one of the manufacturers in the built environment. Mm-hmm. They launched themselves into the murky world of CPD presentations. So do you just want to explain a little bit about what makes CPD presentations different to sales presentations or marketing presentations or what have you?
Yeah, of course. I think the client will definitely agree with me on this, is that the CPDs are typically seen as very technical, and for want of a better way of putting it, sometimes a bit of a tick box on your professional development. And the great news is this client saw them slightly differently and saw it as a huge opportunity, but didn't actually know how to go and harness that opportunity.
I think you're absolutely right. They do represent a really wonderful opportunity to get in front of this wonderful target audience. For this engagement would have been with architects and other influencers in that particular sector. But to your point, so often they're very boring, they're very dry, they're full of detail, and they're a bit of a pain and purgatory for everybody involved. So how did you flip that on its head? How have you turned it into something that the audience gets benefit from, but also the presenter does as well?
No, exactly that. And I totally agree. Typical CPDs we see are absolutely full of great technical stuff, but they're really not engaging to the audience. And I think that's exactly where we started with this, is we said, okay, you've got some fantastic technical content to share, but what's the objective you want to, achieve at the end of this? And they said, well, we want to share this in a way that will make the audience consider us as a really safe pair of hands, as a leader in our industry, and then actually start to remember some of that great information we're giving them. So rather than starting with the content, we actually kind of flipped that on its head and started talking about audience and objectives.
Right. And I think that's one of the reasons this has been such an interesting project to witness. I've been involved a little bit from the sidelines, is that you took the entire process, not only, like you say, the messaging workshop and understanding the audience and going through our standard presentation optimization process, but you've also included the Eiffel Plus process as well. Talk me through how you've worked with a much wider team, sort of over 100 people now have gone through this program. Talk me through that.
Yeah, I guess I'll start at the start of the process and give you a bit of background if that's helpful. So as you said, we kind of kicked off by defining what good looks like for this client. Once we'd understood their audience and what they're trying to achieve, we realized that this wasn't a case of just creating 6 CPD presentations. The slides are a really important part of this, but ultimately that's not what's going to be the measure of success for them. Having 6 good looking decks wasn't really going to cut it. So we took a further step back, really got inside the messaging, and ultimately produced some great CPD presentations. What organizations, big and small, and this customer found as well, typically do is then go, here's sales team, great CPDs, off you go. And it's really easy to go and deliver that CPD and think, oh, thank God that one's done, feet up. And our job was to make sure that they actually then drove further client engagement off the back of those CPDs.
It was really interesting. I was involved in some of the training with this wider group and the onboarding of these presentations. And some of the early feedback we got was, well, this is very different. We've just had these decks foisted upon us, and a few of the brave souls went, we get them sent to us, we have a look at them, we try and figure out what the hell they mean, and then we go out and first couple of goes we'll play ball and we'll deliver these presentations. 9 times out of 10, we don't really understand the stories, so naturally it will fail. And then as a result of that, frankly, before anybody can really spot it, we kind of either start adding bits ourselves or get rid of bits or actually ditch it completely and go back to the previous version. And as a result, all of the investment, all of the hard work that went into it gets wasted because that baton pass between that core team and then the people who are actually out there delivering day in, day out to their audiences, that the baton gets dropped. And this was a great opportunity to make sure that the whole thing was aligned.
No, that really nicely kind of outlines the importance of that onboarding piece. I mean, it's what we call Eiffel Plus, and there's a bit more to it, I think, than just the onboarding, which ultimately has led to the successful uptake of the presentations. And as you said, we started with that training, and what was really nice is then we started to get buy-in to the theory behind the thinking. Which then ultimately made them more comfortable with going and delivering these stories. I think, as you said, it was a bit of a shift in the way they approach CPDs. You know, again, as we said earlier, typically it's I'm going to deliver you with a lot of technical information, but actually we wanted to shift it so that it became more conversational. You know, it's not a sales tool, but there's a soft side to audience engagement within the CPD.
So how did you support that? I mean, that's an easy thing to say. Let's shift these towards a more conversational engagement. But in terms of the tools that were provided and the training that you provided and the onboarding, how did you make that move?
A lot of it actually goes back to understanding of that audience. And one thing that's really interesting is there's a big difference between what an architect may like to hear or what a contractor may like to hear. And historically, we would deliver the same thing. So what we did here is talked about a more conversational style of presenting and built an interactive toolkit to support this, which allowed them to ask questions of the audience, gaining more information from them, and then delivering relevant content off the back of that.
That's fantastic to hear, because one of the things that we hear time and time again, both from audiences and also from presenters, is that they're kind of locked into this battle where they've been given a linear presentation. The presenter has to deliver that with as much gusto and engagement as they possibly can. Any questions that come at them are seen as obstacles rather than opportunities to engage. So they either bat them to one side, or they engage with them and then lose all sense of focus and story structure and what have you. So this use of a toolkit presentation gives that flexibility, which I know when I delivered some of the Eiffel Plus onboarding program, where people go, well, this is great. Who knew you could do this? And you can do it in PowerPoint.
And I think that's where the soft sale element, so to speak, comes in as well, because we're not pitching products. You know, that's not what a CPD is about. But it's allowing us to gain information from the audience. I think that's what's also driven success for these guys, and that goes beyond then just the slides. You know, that then started us thinking about what do we do after these CPDs, and that's formed part of this program we've been able to deliver for this particular client. We've been able to now think about, okay, we have a strong call to action. How do we then sustain that? What comes after? And again, it's still educational, but it's keeping that heartbeat going with the customer post CPD, and they're now seeing a lot more return on investment from that initial CPD, because we're actually able to keep audience engagement. We're positioning them as the industry leader as they want to through their CPDs, and it's actually having a lot more value for that particular audience.
So it's sort of coming full circle really, in the fact that working with that outcome in mind, it's not just develop a great story. It's not just develop a great bunch of slides to support that story. It's not even train the guys to deliver the well-designed story that you've created for them. It actually goes deeper than that. It's a cultural thing from the sound of it, equipping them with tools that allow that conversation to continue. Constantly pushing towards that concept of outcome-based presenting.
And I think a measure of success for myself was the fact that now we've nailed down the story for 6 very different CPDs. It was a really easy conversation to have when they said, guys, we're going remote with this.
Right.
And, you know, there's a very, slight different optimization for a remote presentation. And we would say, no problem. We know what the story is. We know what your objectives are. We just optimize that for remote presenting, and off they go. And they've been able to then, bring their sales team from home and continue to deliver really great information. And, with these crazy times we're in, CPDs are more important perhaps now than ever as a way of continuing that engagement.
Fantastic. If there were any sort of takeaways people will be Yeah, there are a lot of companies out there doing CPD presentations. Some will be working, some won't. What are your sort of top tips to make sure that you get the most out of your CPD engagement?
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. I think, and a little bit of a cliche, I know we've touched it, is really taking that step back and considering the different audiences. I think it's very easy when it comes to CPD to think, okay, they want every bit of technical knowledge. But what I've found with a number of our clients is actually we skip over some of the really valuable bits that won't be a given to that particular audience. So really getting inside that audience and understanding what they might like to see and coupling that together with what are we trying to achieve with this CPD. And I know that's it may sound a little bit silly because ultimately they are still technical presentations, but what we're starting to find with CPDs now is they can be very different things to your classic CPD presentation. And thinking outside the box a little bit is what ultimately going to drive success. You know, I won't go into great detail now, but a CPD doesn't have to be a set of slides. You know, that could be a video, or it could be a conversation with a client if it's on a bit more of an intimate level. And having that open mind, but understanding your audience and objectives and building something off the back of that, I think is what ultimately will drive a bit more success. Fantastic.
Sounds like it's been a really successful project for the client, a really interesting one for you and for the team, where we've had to stretch ourselves a little bit and think a little bit bigger. Really useful. Thanks, Jack.
No problem at all.